My mother-in-law reprinted the invitations to my husband's retirement party under her own return address, told the fire hall we no longer needed the booking, and had the cake redone with her name on it instead of mine. 3 weeks before the party I had been planning since March. Daniel had been a firefighter for 26 years, the last 11 of them as captain of Engine 14. And when he finally told me he was putting his papers in, I cried in the kitchen for reasons I still can't fully explain, except that it felt like the end of something I had been quietly proud of for over a decade. I wanted to do it right. I booked the fire hall for a Saturday in September, put down a deposit on a caterer who does a pig roast the guys from his shift still talk about, and started a spreadsheet, because that is who I am, with columns for RSVP and dietary notes and who was bringing what. His mother Roberta found out about the party the way she finds out about everything, which is that Daniel mentioned it in passing on a phone call, and by the next morning she had already texted me to say she'd start getting the word out. I told her that was sweet, but I had it handled, and sent her the invite so she could just forward it along if she wanted to help. 2 weeks later, my sister-in-law mentioned that she'd received a printed invitation in the mail, cream cardstock, gold script, with RSVP directed to Roberta's address instead of mine. I hadn't approved any printed invitation. When I called Roberta about it, she said she just thought a keepsake piece would mean more than an email, and that she'd been happy to cover the printing cost herself, like that was the part I'd object to. The date on her version was right. The venue was not. She'd listed the country club instead of the fire hall because, she said, a firehouse just felt a little sad for a man's life achievement. I called the fire hall to make sure our booking was still solid, and the events coordinator told me someone identifying herself as the mother of the honoree handling the arrangements had called the week before to cancel it, saying the family had decided to go a different direction. I hadn't authorized anyone to cancel anything. I rebooked the same room, paid a rebooking fee out of my own pocket rather than fight about it by phone, and asked Daniel to please say something to his mother, because I was trying to keep this civil and it was getting harder by the week. He called her. She cried, said she was only trying to help because she worried I was overwhelmed with the twins' school schedule on top of everything else, and that she'd back off. She did not back off. The caterer called me a few days later, confused because a woman claiming to be the client had phoned to change the order from the pig roast to a plated dinner service and to ask whether the cake could be redone. I hadn't changed anything. I drove to the bakery myself that afternoon, and the woman at the counter pulled up the order on her screen and turned it around so I could read it. A sheet cake reading, "Congratulations on your retirement, Daniel. With all my love and thanks for 26 wonderful years, Mom." Not from your family. Not my name anywhere on it. On a cake for a party I had booked, planned, and put a non-refundable deposit on in March. The bakery hadn't charged the change yet because they needed the card on file to match, and it didn't, so they'd held it, which is the only reason I found out before the party instead of standing next to a cake with her name on it in front of 200 people. That night Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table and I told him I couldn't keep absorbing this quietly, that every time I fixed one thing she'd already moved to the next, and that I needed him to actually say something with weight behind it instead of a phone call that ended in her crying and nothing changing. He agreed, but he also said, gently, that his mother had raised him alone after his father left, had worked 2 jobs to get him through the academy, and that some of this, he thought, wasn't really about the party. It was about her watching her son's whole career end and needing to feel like she still mattered in it. I understood that. I even had sympathy for it. But sympathy doesn't uncancel a hall booking or take her name off a cake, and I told him so. He gave me a leather portfolio for my birthday 2 years earlier, the kind with a legal pad and a pen loop, half as a joke because I always had my planning binder with me at every family event. I started using it for real. Every confirmation email, every invoice, every text where I rebooked or repaid or corrected something, I printed and clipped inside it, in order, with the date on top. I wasn't building a case to destroy her. I was building a record so that if this happened one more time, I wouldn't be standing there alone trying to explain myself from memory while she cried and everyone assumed I was the one being difficult. The week of the party, Roberta called a family group chat meeting, unprompted, at her house, just to finalize logistics, and stood at her dining table with a printed run of show that had her giving the opening remarks, followed by a slideshow she said she'd put together from photos the family sent her, followed by dinner, followed by a toast from her, thanking the department on behalf of the family for the honor of having Daniel serve. I was listed on her sheet as seating and favors. My own husband's retirement party and my role, on paper, in her handwriting, was party favors. Daniel read it and went very quiet. The kind of quiet I'd learned over 9 years of marriage meant he was angrier than he was letting himself show in his mother's dining room. He folded the paper, thanked her for her enthusiasm, and told her we already had a program and that we'd be in touch. We left without finishing the coffee she'd poured. The night of the party, the fire hall looked exactly the way I'd pictured it in March. String lights over the folding tables, a slideshow loop of Daniel through the decades running on the projector I'd asked his captain's aide to help me put together, the pig roast smell already drifting in from the parking lot where the caterer had the smoker going. Roberta arrived 40 minutes early in a dress clearly bought for a bigger room than a fire hall banquet space, looked around, and asked me, pleasantly, in front of the caterer, whether this was still the plan or if we were regrouping at the club after. I told her this was the plan and that I hoped she'd enjoy it. She smiled the smile she uses when she's decided not to fight in public yet, and went to find a seat near the front, next to the podium, where she had apparently already decided she'd be standing. Guests started arriving, guys from 3 different shifts, a couple of retired chiefs, Daniel's sister and her kids, my own parents, and it was, for about an hour, exactly the warm, chaotic night I had wanted for him. Then the department chief, who was emceeing, said he understood the family wanted to say a few words before dinner, and looked at me to confirm the order. Roberta was already standing, already halfway to the podium with an index card in her hand, and I watched my husband's face do the thing where he decides, in real time, whether tonight is the night he finally draws a line with his mother in front of everyone he respects. I stood up before he had to. I asked the chief if I could go first, since I'd promised Daniel's crew a slideshow before dinner got cold, and he waved me up without hesitation, because as far as he knew, that was simply the plan. I brought the leather portfolio with me, not as a prop, just because it had the notes for my actual speech clipped inside it along with everything else, and I set it on the podium and opened it to my notes, and the fire hall confirmation letter happened to be right behind them, visible in Daniel's captain's handwriting on the top where he'd signed off on the room the week before as a formality. I talked about the man Daniel was when I met him, a probie who still couldn't parallel park the engine, and the man he became, the one his crew called when their own fathers wouldn't have known what to say. I thanked the department. I thanked our kids for putting up with a dad who missed 2 Christmases to work shifts nobody else wanted. And then, because Roberta was still standing near the podium waiting for her turn and had started, quietly, to tell the table next to her that she'd handled most of tonight herself, I said, lightly, that I wanted to publicly thank my mother-in-law too for how much she cared about tonight going well, and that I knew that care sometimes came out sideways, like the printed invitations with her return address that some of you got instead of mine, or the cake order she tried to put her name on solo at the bakery on 5th Street, or the fire hall booking she called in to cancel 3 weeks ago, which is why, if anyone's wondering, I'm the one who rebooked this exact room out of my own pocket the same afternoon. I said it warmly. I said it like a fond, slightly exasperated inside joke, not an accusation, because I had decided in the car on the way over that I would not turn Daniel's night into a fight, only into the truth, said once, calmly, in a room full of people who already loved him and would understand exactly what they were hearing without me having to spell it out further. A few people laughed the uncomfortable laugh people laugh when they've clearly heard fragments of this story secondhand already. Roberta's face went the color of the tablecloth. She sat back down without taking the podium, and when the chief moved smoothly into dinner, she told the people at her table she had a headache and left before the cake, the correct cake, the one with Daniel's name and the whole family's name on it, was even cut. Daniel found me by the smoker afterward, where I'd gone to get some air and let my hands stop shaking, and he didn't say anything at first, just put his arm around me and looked out at the parking lot where his mother's car had already pulled out. Then he said that in 9 years he had never once heard me raise my voice at her, and that somehow what I'd just done in front of 200 people had landed harder than any argument could have, because I hadn't accused her of anything. I'd just told the truth in order, the way I'd been writing it down in that portfolio for 3 weeks, and let everyone do their own math. She called 2 days later, not to apologize exactly, but to say she felt ambushed and that she hoped I was proud of myself. I told her I was, actually, proud of the party, proud of my husband, and that I still had every receipt if she ever wanted to go over the timeline again. She has not asked to go over the timeline again. Daniel and I have a rule now, one his mother doesn't know exists. Anytime she offers to handle something for a family event, one of us says thank you, we've got it, and the portfolio comes out that same night, just in case. It has stayed mostly empty since the party.